Hello YouTube, it's BirdO'Prey5, and this is a requested review of yesterday's Enterprise, Season 3, Episode 15 of Star Trek The Next Generation. It was requested by Captain Redneck. Thank you, Captain. So this is one of the more famous episodes of The Next Generation. Most fans probably remember it quite fondly. We'll see if that's for good reason or not. The episode starts out with a very famous scene, at least among Trekkies. It is the scene where Guinan introduces Worf to prune juice for the very first time. And Worf drinks it, and he says, "A warrior's drink." He's quite happy with this new drink. Guinan's quite proud of herself. And Guinan goes on to tell Worf that, it wouldn't hurt you to find some companionship. Companionship, of course, meaning women. Worf says that would require a Klingon woman. Earth women are too fragile. And Guinan kind of laughs and says, there's a few women on this ship who would find you tame. And now Worf laughs hysterically. One of the few laughs we see Worf actually do in the series. And Worf says, that's impossible. And Guinan says, well, you'll never know if you don't try. And Worf says, well, then we'll never know. And I respected Worf for that line. Guinan calls him a coward, but Worf did not, kill her where she stood like a real Klingon would, since he is on a Federation starship. Worf says he was just looking out for his crewmates. Then, before the scene can go any further, an anomaly appears outside the window in 10 forward, and Worf gets called to the bridge. Guinan says no, looking at the anomaly as if she has some premonition something bad is about to happen. Worf comes to the bridge, and it seems every other senior officer is on duty but him. I guess he had the day off. The guy who walks away when Worf gets there, that poor guy. He thought he was going to be in the middle of the action, and Worf gets called back, and it's time for him to leave. It's not saying nobody has any faith in you, mister, but, Worf gets paid the big bucks. You don't. Anyway, Data can't figure out if this anomaly that they can clearly see is there or not. And then Worf cuts everybody off and says, something is happening. I'm picking up something on sensors, like Data doesn't have the same sensors. Data is now scanning sensors, and now we see a Federation starship come through this rift, and in a very cool effect, the bridge turns into the battle bridge, and when Captain Picard moves his head, we're expecting to see Worf. Behind him, we instead see Tasha Yar. And now we go to Guinan, who's in 10 forward, but 10 forward is not a quiet, cozy place like it used to be. It's loud and bustling with dozens and dozens of officers who appear to be in a rush. They're wearing completely different uniforms. Not completely different, but clearly different uniforms. A little more militaristic. And now we get a beautiful, beautiful shot of the Enterprise C coming through the rift. Tasha is saying it's definitely a Federation ship. She's getting the registry number. And of course she reads it out. NCC 1701. C. USS Enterprise. And Picard looks at her. How can this be? She doesn't say that. That's just the way he's looking. And we get the credits. I can only imagine, had I been watching this episode for the very first time, and I don't remember watching it for the first time, but had I been watching it for the first time, I would have been really intrigued by now. If I didn't know what this episode was going to be about, I'd probably be thinking Mirror Universe. Somehow they came to the Mirror Universe because the bridge got dark. It's the same but different. They seem to be on a warship. I would have bet a lot of money at this point that we were in the Mirror Universe because the Mirror Universe was one of the very great episodes of the original series. And it's so ridiculous that TNG never went to the Mirror Universe. If TNG is going to have the Naked Now to follow up the Naked Time, why wouldn't they follow up Mirror Mirror? It made no sense. But whatever. We'll deal. I'm still kind of annoyed TNG never gave us a Mirror Universe episode. There's a calm that comes over me when I hear the Next Generation intro. Even though it's not my favorite Trek, it calms me. So Picard is giving a captain's log, or a military log, actually. They've encountered the Enterprise C, the immediate predecessor to what he calls this battleship. Now, Wesley is saying that the Enterprise C was destroyed over 20 years ago. Data saying presumed destroyed. So they don't know what's happened. Captain Picard is asking if it's been adrift, or has it traveled through time. Data is saying we just encountered a rift in time. Like, duh. The rift isn't stable, Captain. It could collapse at any time, says Data. This bridge is so dark. It's like maybe Star Trek Discovery just looked at yesterday's Enterprise and said we could go darker. Okay, so they finally get some life signs. Riker calls for them to be beamed over for survivors, and Picard belays that order. Picard is already worried about interfering with their history. Okay, the distress signal's coming over. It's Captain Garrett. It's a woman's voice, in case you weren't sure. She's saying that they require immediate assistance, lost warp drive, life support, and they were attacked by Romulans. Of course, Riker points out that there was no record of the Romulans ever attacking the Enterprise C. Picard returns the hail, doesn't say what ship he's from, just says he's from a Federation starship. And he tells Riker to go over, tend to their wounded, try to get the ship back online. But whatever you do, don't discuss where or when they are. Crusher says that there's Klingon battlecruisers headed towards the sector. So Picard gave Riker one main objective. Don't talk about where or when they are. So of course now they've beamed over. We see the deck, the bridge of this ship is got dead people strewn about. Tasha Yar, Dr. Crusher, Commander Riker are over there. And I think some unnamed, maybe it's Data, I'm not sure who else. Okay, so Riker walks up to Captain Garrett. She's alive. He calls over Dr. Crusher to her. Geordi's there. And Dr. Crusher says we have to get her back to the Enterprise. Why? Why would you say that, Dr. Crusher? All you had to say was we had to get her back to the ship. I guess Commander Riker didn't tell you the captain's orders. Immediately, Captain Garrett is kind of confused and like, what do you mean, back to the Enterprise? She takes Dr. Crusher's word and Riker's word that they'll explain. She goes with them and she's beams away. The other 120 plus people on the ship who might need doctor's attention, I guess that's unfortunate for them. Dr. Crusher left with the captain. I guess she's the most important person on the ship. Anyway, after being told everyone else on the bridge was dead, there's a survivor on the bridge. He was under rubble. It's Lieutenant Castillo. Lieutenant Castillo. Back on the Enterprise, the away team reports in. Riker says they've stabilized life support. It's going to take time to restore main power. It's a real mess. 125 survivors. Riker wants to save the ship. That Federation could use it. Starfleet could use it. Picard says he's got 9 hours. If he can save the ship, we'll use it. Otherwise, we'll beam the survivors over and destroy the ship, because the Klingons are coming to attack. And Guinan comes strolling onto the battle bridge, looking around, and Picard sees her, calls her over, and Guinan tells Picard, we need to talk. This is all wrong. It's all wrong. It's not the way it's supposed to be. And Picard looks at her with intense curiosity. So we went to a commercial break. Guinan's telling Picard that things just don't feel right. It's not the way it's supposed to be. Everything's different. Picard's like, what's different? She's like, you're different. The bridge is different. Picard's like, what's wrong with the bridge? She's like, it's not right. He says it's the same bridge. Nothing's wrong with the bridge. She says, I know nothing's wrong with the bridge, but I also know something's wrong. And there's supposed to be families, children on this ship. Picard's like, children on the Enterprise? Guinan, we're at war. And Guinan's like, we're not supposed to be. We're not supposed to be at war. This isn't a ship of war. It's a ship of peace. Oh, kumbaya. It's a ship of peace. Now, I think Picard actually wishes it would be. I think he's hoping that that was true. But he knows it's not. Picard is saying, what you're suggesting, and Guinan cuts him off. Says, I'm not suggesting. It has to go back. So she's basically ordering Picard to send the ship back. Okay, so we're in sick bay, and Captain Garrett is on the bed. 3 doctors are working over her at once. Picard comes in to see what's going on. He introduces himself as Captain Jean-Luc Picard. She asks how her ship is. And now she's asking Picard, where did he come from? We weren't picking up any other Federation ships, ignoring the clear uniform difference. He asks her what was the last thing she remembers, and she remembers answering a distress signal. Picard is saying, what distress signal? She said, you must have heard it from the Klingon outpost. And they're all looking at her like she's crazy, and she is finally realizing that something is amok. Now she's realizing this sick bay is years ahead of anything she's ever seen. The uniforms are different. She's asking, what ship is this, Captain? What ship? And for some reason, Dr. Crusher tells her to please try to be still. And Captain Garrett must insist, what ship? So Captain Picard finally sits down next to her and explains that she's aboard the Enterprise. It's 22 years in the future. And she's like, does my crew know? Because she's actually a good captain. She's not the one who decided to give all the medical staff to her. Captain Garrett wants to tell her crew, but Picard says that he'll see that they're informed. He's a little worried that if they have knowledge of the future and they go back, could be a problem, but Captain Garrett says, like, we just barely escaped with our lives. Reminds me of the Captain Riker from Parallels. The Borg is everywhere. We will go back. But, not as bad, because that Captain Riker tried to destroy the shuttlecraft Worf was on to prevent going back. So, Captain Garrick is still talking about responding to a distress call that the Romulans were attacking. There were 4 warbirds attacking. Picard tells her that history records that outpost was destroyed, and there's no record of a Federation starship rescuing a Klingon outpost. Had there been, it might have averted 20 years of war. So now we find out the big difference in this timeline is that the Klingons and the Federation have been at war for 20 years. So Tasha and Castillo are over on the Enterprise C with Riker, and they're trying to get weapons and stuff and shields back online. Castillo's saying, we're never going to see our homes again or our families. Tasha rightfully points out, how do you know they're not still alive? It's really only been 22 years. I mean, they're older. They've probably moved on, remarried. Your kids have grown up if you have any, but they're alive in all likelihood. Well, maybe not with the war, but yeah, they're probably okay if they're on Earth. Castillo says he's lucky to be alive at all. Tasha says that, yeah, he might not like it, taking heavy losses to the Klingons. Castillo says they were negotiating a peace change when he left, but Tasha says a lot of changes in this time. And Castillo is hitting on Tasha. When we get a break, maybe you could fill me in. Wow. You spared no time. Good for you. Good for you, Castillo. So now Data is saying there's a high probability the temporal rift is symmetrical. And Captain Picard says, well, what happens if we send the Enterprise C back? And Data says there's a high probability it would return to the same point in space at almost precisely the same time it left. Well, why would it be almost precisely the same time it left? If it's symmetrical, if 14 or 20 hours pass on this side of the rift, shouldn't 20 hours have passed on the other side of the rift? But I digress. Tasha's talking about the Enterprise D, the first Galaxy-class ship built by Starfleet, and she says it has 42 decks. And she's been here straight out of the academy. She's been here 4 years. Castillo says, yeah, he was lucky to get the position on his Enterprise, too. So they go to visit Captain Garrick in medical. The captain asks the lieutenant, how's the ship? He says that they've restored life support and some stuff. Captain says, concentrate on weapons. Captain Picard needs all the help they can get. And Tasha says that we've detected Klingons in the sector. And now the captain is pissed nobody told her. She's getting up and she's going to resume her duties. Dr. Crusher says you need at least 24 more hours of rest. And the captain says the ship and her crew need her now. 24 hours might as well be 24 years. She walks out of sickbay. Good for you, Captain. So Picard and Guinan are talking. Picard says he needs more. He needs more than just Guinan's intuition to send them back on a suicide mission. And Guinan says there is no more. I wish I could explain it. I don't even understand it. If I don't understand it, I can't explain it to you. Captain Picard is saying, this isn't enough. This isn't enough. Guinan's saying, well, every fiber of my being is saying I'm right. And then she goes into the guilt trip. I've never pressured you or asked you for anything. And Captain Picard's like, who's to say that this timeline is any less valid than any other? And then Guinan throws out the figure that 40 billion people have already died who shouldn't have had to die. 40 billion people. Let's assume she's talking about both Federation and Klingon casualties. 20 billion on each side, perhaps? That is a tremendous, tremendous war. I guess over 20 years. But I mean, there's a whole planets that must have been destroyed. Not just starships. I mean, there weren't 20 billion Federation officers and starships. Klingons must have been destroying entire planets. That is crazy. It makes the Dominion War look like the Gulf War, the first one. So Tasha and her boyfriend are talking here, and Guinan comes in and sees Tasha seemingly for the first time. Shocked. She must know who Tasha was. And she says, have you ordered yet, Tasha? Guinan is staring at her with crazy eyes. And Tasha realizes something is wrong. And Tasha says they just need a couple of TKLs for the road. And she introduces Commander Castillo. And Guinan's, nods her head. Okay, I'll get that stuff for you. Tasha tells Castillo it's the first time for everything. She's never seen Guinan. She's never seen anything bother Guinan before. And then Castillo asks, what's a TKL? Tasha says it's a standard ration. The food replicators are at minimum. So basically, Guinan just has to pick up two packets, 2 field rations. Okay, and it's not coming from a replicator. It's obviously just in a box somewhere. Just remember this. Castillo says most everyone calls him Castillo, but his mother calls him Richard. So Tasha says, okay, Castillo. And then Castillo says, I think maybe better if you called me Richard. Why, Castillo? Because Tasha reminds you of your mom? What was that? And then Picard calls them all to the bridge. And so much for lunch, says Tasha. And she looks at Guinan. And Guinan looks like she's cleaning up dirty dishes. She's not even getting them. She didn't even bother to go get them the rations. It's great. Whoa. You just said you would get them for him. Then you went to clear off a table, almost like they wouldn't get to eat. They're in the war room, I guess, which is what they call the ready room now. Picard is telling basically the whole crew about his plan to send them back. That they have to go back to restore the past. Basically, everybody, Geordi and Riker, are totally against this. They're like, this doesn't make any sense. Data's kind of keeping an open mind. Picard is trying to insist that we have to send it back. The only way to know is if Guinan's correct is to send them back. Picard's like, basically, it's already been settled. Riker wants to leave his opinion, and Picard says, no, I know your opinion. And here's where Riker says they're gonna, in my opinion, you're asking them to go to a meaningless death. And now Data says, not really a meaningless death. If the ship ends up destroyed, the Klingons will see that a Federation ship tried to help. Even their deaths would be helpful because Klingons, supposedly Klingons value honor above all else, even though we rarely see that. So even their deaths could prevent the war. Which, talking about Klingons, by the way, we noticed Worf isn't in this episode. He was in it at the very beginning, but Worf is not on the Enterprise right now. Which I guess makes sense if the Federation's been at war with the Klingons for 20 years. I don't know, how old was Worf at the beginning of TNG? I put him at older than 20. I figured he was probably 30. So I would think that he was probably still rescued by his parents. But with the Klingon War, did Worf go back to his people? Wouldn't it have been cool if Worf was on one of the Klingon ships that come attack later? He's not. He's not, by the way. But wouldn't that have been cool? And you wouldn't have had to hire another actor. Now, we don't actually see any of the Klingons on the Klingon ships, but we do hear the Klingon captain calling over, demanding the Enterprise surrender. That could have been Worf's voice. And they wouldn't have had to hire a voice actor to make that part. But no, they didn't do that. They didn't do that. Again, I'm kind of nitpicking here. But so the two captains are talking on the Enterprise C. Garrett is asking, so you believe this woman? And Picard's trying to explain that Guinan has a special wisdom, and she could arrange for Guinan to speak directly to Captain Garrett. Captain Garrett's like, there's no way in hell we're going to survive this. Why don't you come back with us? Your weapons could destroy the Romulans. And Picard says he can't go back for reasons. Captain Garrett now says that a significant number of her crew want to return even knowing the odds. And some want to return because they don't like slipping out in the middle of a fight. Which I find hard to believe, to be honest. Because these people, having no reason to think going back would have saved anybody's life at this point. What do they have? They just have a death wish? I mean, these aren't stupid people. If I was told me going back could save 40 billion lives, oh yeah, I would totally consider it. Don't get me wrong. But at this point, her crew doesn't know anything about them going back saving lives. Her crew doesn't know about an alternate timeline that is created because she came here, because her ship came here. They don't know that. That wasn't public knowledge. This was only being discussed by the senior people of the ship. Captain Garrett orders Castillo to inform the crew they're going back, and he gets a bit of a smile. And she promises she'll give the Romulans a good fight. And the history books will remember it. And Picard says he knows she will. Picard calls Tasha Yar to come back with him to the Enterprise. And she asks to stay a minute. And he gives her permission. She wants to say goodbye to Castillo. He says he'll try to put some of her tactical briefing to good use. And Tasha is saying, well, their ship has a lot more maneuverability than the Romulans. And then they both realize, it's useless. It is useless. Tasha just wishes him good luck. Castillo's now saying that if Tasha ever gets back to Earth and sees a man in his late 50s looking hard at her from across the room, and they kind of realize what he's saying. Now, they're saying goodbye with a handshake. When they got attacked, they're getting attacked. The Klingons have attacked. Tasha jumps right to the tactical position, which happens to be where the Khan is on the Enterprise, or wherever Data sits on the Enterprise, which isn't tactical, on the Enterprise D. Tasha jumped right there. So now we see the world's biggest Klingon bird of prey coming in at the Enterprise D and the Enterprise C. You would think this should be no big deal for the Enterprise D. Phasers are firing, and the bird of prey cloaks. We never see them again until they attack later with their friends. Presumably it's them. In that little exchange of phaser fire, Captain Garrett got killed. Very unfortunate that they have explodium all over the bridge, but she got something right through her forehead. So Castillo is now the senior officer, the last surviving senior officer of the Enterprise C. He's saying he's willing to go back. He wants to lead this mission. Riker is trying to say that this is stupid. They were never supposed to fight without their captain. Picard isn't saying anything. Now Data is saying that there's instability in the time rift, possibly because of the fight with the Klingons. Tasha is saying that the Klingons are going to be here any minute. Their coordinates must have been transmitted to the Klingons. Castillo is saying he wants to go, and he's going to go unless ordered not to. Picard asks how long before he can be ready. He says he needs a few hours, and Picard says make it so. So they're still going. They're now in the Enterprise D transporter room. Castillo is going to get beamed over to the Enterprise C. So Castillo and Tasha Yar are having an awkward goodbye moment in the transporter room in front of the transporter chief. And the music changes, and Castillo goes in for the kiss, and there's Tasha Yar reciprocating, and it's quite a passionate kiss for two people that haven't kissed before. And it might be just a little awkward for the transporter chief, who's standing like 3 feet away. But, he's a professional, or she. They don't seem to bat an eye. And then they beam Castillo to the Enterprise C. Now Tasha has a look. She's a woman on a mission. She heads to Guinan in 10 forward. And Guinan knows that it's Tasha. And 10 forward is empty. Guinan says, "Can I get you something, Tasha?" She knows it's Guinan. She knows it's Tasha. Tasha wants to know what happens to her in the other timeline. Guinan says, "I don't have the biographies. I told her the captain, it's just a feeling." Tasha says, "But there's something when you look at me. I can see it in your eyes. We've known each other too long." And Guinan says, "We weren't meant to know each other at all. At least that's what I sense when I look at you." Tasha's like, "What does that mean?" Guinan says, "You're not supposed to be here." She's like, "Well, where am I supposed to be?" And Guinan says, "Dead." "Dead." And she asks, "Do you know how?" And Guinan says, "No. If I knew, it was an empty death. A death without purpose, by spiteful writers, because you left the show. That's all I know." Okay, she only said the first part of that. It was an empty death. A death without purpose. I might have ad-libbed the spiteful writers. Okay, so now Tasha's coming to Captain Picard. And she's requesting the transfer to the Enterprise C. And Picard is kind of shocked and dumbfounded, which, of course, he's like, "For what reason?" She says, "Well, they need someone at Tactical." Picard's like, "Well, I need you here." Now Tasha's basically saying that she had this conversation with Guinan, and Picard's kind of pissed that Guinan was going to told her anything. Tasha's like, no, I asked Guinan. I made her tell me." Picard's asking, what did Guinan tell her? Tasha's saying, "I don't belong here. I'm supposed to be dead. When I was told that my death had no meaning, I didn't like that. So I'd rather die with meaning, because surely if I go back, there's no way I'm going to be captured by Romulans and have a daughter who's going to become an evil Romulan, who's then going to attack the Enterprise and help the Klingons and start all these problems in the future. That's surely not going to happen. I'm just going to go back to die." So Captain Picard says she doesn't belong on that ship. And Tasha says, well, Captain Garrick belongs on the ship, and that there's a certain logic to this request. Picard says there's no logic to this at all. Picard says the Enterprise C will be destroyed. And Tasha says, but at least with someone at Tactical, they have a chance to defend themselves well. It could be seconds or minutes, but those could be the minutes that change history. And Picard changes his mind. Permission granted. Maybe you should change into a appropriate uniform for the time, just in case you're captured. Maybe not bring advanced 24th century comm badge technology back with you to the past. No, there's no time for that. She'll just beam over with her modern uniform and her modern comm badge. Nobody's going to worry. And she's reporting for duty. Castillo's like, "I don't want you here." And she's like, "I need to be here." Captain Picard approved my transfer. This isn't a joke, Tasha. We're going to go back. We're going to die. We're not coming back. Tasha's like, these are my orders. These are my orders. Show me someone in your crew who can do the job better than I can. Apparently none. Those other 125 people, completely useless. Completely useless. It must suck to have a crew of 125 useless people. So Tasha sits back at tactical commercial. Okay, so the D and the C are back. Captain Picard is making a supplemental military log saying that Tasha's transferred to the C and their long-range scanners have picked up Klingons who apparently are coming in uncloaked. Why not travel that cloak the entire time? Who knows? So Picard is saying to all hands, as they know they could outrun the Klingon vessels, but they must protect the Enterprise C at all costs, and that history never forgets the name Enterprise, which was a very inspiring speech. Now the Klingons come, 3 of the big birds of prey. Enterprise D shields are holding. They got a few phaser shots. He's moving the Enterprise D between it and the C, and he's barking out, firing patterns. For some reasons, they just shot photon torpedoes when they should have been shooting phasers because their shields are still up. These 3 Klingon vessels seem to be in no hurry to destroy or attack anything. They're taking one shot at a time. They are not concentrating their fire. So Wesley is saying one of the ships is going after the Enterprise C. Picard is having the D move in between them. Surely the Klingons won't see this move and just go around the Enterprise D to get to the C. And it seems like they don't. So they're in engineering. And despite really not taking all that much damage, there's a hell of a lot of damage in engineering. And now the Klingons are flanking them. Picard is saying, continue to fire all phasers. Well, you weren't firing all phasers before. So how can you continue? Anyway, the phasers take out one of the birds of prey. Doesn't even need a photon torpedo. So people are falling all over the bridge. Now the attacks are pretty tight. The shields are down, or pretty close to down. Heavy damage to the secondary hull. Geordi's looking at air coming out of the warp core. Containment fields are failing. He's going to have to dump the reactor core. Geordi, you probably should have been doing that already. Geordi's saying that there's going to be emergency shutdown. Then they got hit again, and there's a coolant link. There's a coolant link. He had to open a panel on the wall to talk about the coolant link. He's estimates 2 minutes until a warp core breach. And then that panel he opened exploded. And he's getting people to run past him. Picard's asking how longer until the Enterprise C enters the rift. Data's saying 52 seconds. So they have 2 minutes, so they'll be okay. Picard is saying we need to get phasers back. Data's saying that he can't bypass the broken conduits. And now Riker's killed. And now a Klingon voice is telling the Enterprise to surrender and prepare to be boarded. Picard says that'll be the day. And he jumps over and goes to tactical himself. And Picard is able to get the phasers to work, even though we were told they were offline a second ago. But Picard did it. So the Enterprise C goes through the rift. And what do you know? We are back to the original Enterprise D. And Picard moves, and it's Worf behind him. Picard asks for a report. Worf says, I don't know, there was something there, but it's gone now. Picard says, okay, send a probe. We're on our way to Archer 4. And now Guinan calls up and asks, is everything okay? And Picard says, yeah, everything's okay. Is something wrong? Guinan's in 10 forward, looking around, and says, no, everything's fine. Sorry to bother you. She points to a worker at the bar to bring Geordi a drink. She sits down with Geordi at a table and asks Geordi to tell her about Tasha Yar. And Geordi looks a little puzzled. And end of episode. Executive producer, Gene Roddenberry. So, I say it's well remembered by many fans as one of the best episodes of TNG.
And it surely is. And I know I brought up little things, but you know what? They're just nitpicking things. None of them made them a bad episode. I mean, every episode of any TV show you can nitpick to death. None of these really were showstoppers for me. None of them hurt my enjoyment of the episode. Yeah, it would have been nice in hindsight to have Worf as a Klingon. Maybe it wasn't in the budget, but whatever. I mean, Worf is already a Klingon, so I don't know. Maybe they didn't have the budget for a Klingon bridge. But, you know, these things are just... hindsight's 20/20. I can always go to any TV show and say, yeah, you could make it better if you did this, this, and this. But you know what? I wasn't there at the time, and who knows what the decisions, what cuts they had to make to even get the episode out as they did. So I'm not going to hold it against them. Yesterday's Enterprise was a great Next Generation episode. Certainly one of my favorites. Probably in my top 10 TNG episodes. I haven't officially made a top 10 TNG list, but I can't imagine it not being on there. If you've never seen a Star Trek The Next Generation episode, I don't know. Should you start with this one? I don't think so. But I probably would start with Season 3, Episode 1, and go from there. And then watch through TNG, and then go back to Seasons 1 and 2, after you've already watched Seasons 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, because 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are the quality seasons of The Next Generation. I really liked that Worf drinking prune juice became kind of a running gag throughout not only the rest of The Next Generation, but right into Deep Space Nine. Worf asks Quark for prune juice. That was hysterical when Worf gets to Deep Space Nine. I am honestly a little curious as to Guinan talking about these women on the Enterprise that Worf could find companionship with. And I just did air quotes, even though nobody's actually seeing me speak, which is weird. But just know I did them. Companionship. Because we never see them. I mean, again, Worf says Earth women, but there's more than just Earth women on the Enterprise. I mean, there are Vulcan women, I'm sure, and other species. They can't all be soft like humans, but we never see them. We never see them. In an earlier episode, Season 1, Episode 10, Hide and Q, where Commander Riker actually becomes a Q, one of the things he gives to Worf is a Klingon woman. He gives Worf a Klingon woman as a present. Politics of that aside, Worf rejects her because he says that he hasn't been with his people. He wouldn't even know what to do with a Klingon woman anymore. She's alien to him. Here, 2 seasons later, he's saying that he would need a Klingon woman. So I'm just going to point out a little inconsistency there. I get it. The script before called for him to reject her. For some reason, he had to reject all the presents for Commander Riker to realize that he should not have been a Q, which in itself was an awful episode, and that's why it was a Season 1 episode. And it's why by Season 3 things are so much better. I really like Captain Garrett. I thought it's too late now, but an Enterprise C series with Captain Garrett, she seemed fit to be an Enterprise captain. She wasn't afraid of battle. She wasn't going to do anything stupid until she learned that going to die would actually save billions of lives, possibly. She was willing to take the chance. I applaud her. She's definitely a hero. And I liked seeing those uniforms again. The uniforms they were wearing on the Enterprise C were pretty similar to the uniforms we saw in Star Trek 2 through 3, 4, 5, 6. The good uniforms, the red uniforms. So all in all, this was a really good Next Generation episode. It's a Next Generation episode that I don't mind watching. I could watch it probably once every couple of weeks and not get tired of it. Like I said, it would definitely be in my top 10. I haven't made my top 10 yet. One day I will. One day I will. But I'd have to give this episode easily a 9 out of 10. And I know it's going to sound high, but like I said, those nitpicks earlier did not diminish from this episode. They were just things I felt I had to point out. This is good entertainment. It's good Star Trek. You know, it should make people fans, which is probably the most important thing any Star Trek episode could do. So well done, guys. A well-earned Qapla. Qapla, indeed. And thank you guys all so much for checking out my review. Captain Redneck, I hope it meets with your approval. But if not, you know, anyone, leave me a comment. Let me know what I could have done better. Check out birdofprey5.com. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share the video. Sharing the video on social media would do more than anything to help me and the channel. I really appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you all for watching my video. Please remember to comment, like, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that bell icon. Without it, you won't get notifications of new videos. Check out birdofprey5.com, the new home of everything Bird of Prey 5 on the web. You can also check out my forum at juot.net. I'm also on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, and Gab. If you'd like to make a donation, check out paypal.me/birdofprey5 or on birdofprey5.com. Take care.